on target.
Almost there.
Stay on target.
Right behind me.
Almost there.
Hello, welcome to this edition of Yakima on Target. I'm your host, Sean Davido, and today I'm with Cheri Kilty, the Executive Director of the Yakima YWCA.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about domestic violence, but I want to talk about a little bit of the services that you provide. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Our YWCA here in Yakima has been around since 1906, I believe. It's over 110 years old.
Right.
And the YWCA is an organization whose mission is to empower women and eliminate racism. And over our time in the community, we've done a variety of things. Many YWCAs started out as a place for women in the rural communities to have like a little hotel to stay at, and we have some of that in our history. And since the late 70s and 80s, we've primarily focused on women and children that are experiencing domestic violence. So we have an emergency shelter and transitional housing all under one roof at our location on Yakima Avenue. And when somebody comes to stay with us, we try to figure out what's going on in their situation, what could we do to be helpful, what could everyone else in the community do to help people, and kind of build that roadmap to their future. And that might include employment, it could include training, education, those kind of things. We also spend a lot of time with children, because one of the ways we kind of pass abuse forward is how through the eyes of the children, and how they experience how to solve problems, what you do when you're frustrated, does somebody in the family control everybody else, all of those things. So part of our effort also is to work with children to help them develop some healthy relationship habits, also work certainly with the women, and sometimes we do hear from men, also to kind of get on that path of learning some skills to do things differently. We also have a legal advocacy program, and so we're not attorneys, but we certainly can help people understand the legal system, how to get a protection order. Our legal advocate also receives all of the domestic violence reports from the police department, and we follow up on those every day to try to connect with people to see if they need something. We also go to court with people occasionally, and we have a coordinated community response team that is made up of police, prosecutors, school system, hospitals, the counseling providers for perpetrator treatment providers, and the YWCA and some other Aspen, our sexual assault program, all get together on a quarterly basis to talk about how we can improve just the system of service and try to make a difference in people's lives.
Wonderful stuff. How big is the problem in Yakima? It's a pretty big issue.
It's a pretty big problem. So the police department are responding to more than 10 calls a day.
Wow.
We get more than 18 calls a day on our crisis hotline looking for help. In 2018, we served over 13,000 people.
Wow.
And in the last 10 years, it's been over 60. So our town is not really any different than anywhere else. 1 in 4 women are going to experience abuse in their lifetime. And so we don't really talk about that in the reverse. Like, does that mean 1 in 4 people are abusing somebody?
Right.
And so it's a problem everywhere. It's just not a problem here in our community.
Now, what are some of the things that you think can be done? You offer a lot of services. Is there more that we can do?
I definitely think there's always more we can do. The more we can educate all of us on what does domestic violence look like, what could we say to somebody who needs help, also more accountability and attention on the people that are being abusive. Right. There are not a lot of services for those folks, and it's very lengthy. Sometimes people that are abusive don't think they're doing anything wrong, and that they even need...
They don't think they have a problem at all.
Right, and they don't need to talk to anybody. But the more we can do to normalize the conversation that it happens in our community, and it's not shameful to reach out. Domestic violence lives in silence, and so the more we can bring a light to that, the more we can try to reach people so they're not afraid. Just yesterday I had a woman contact me that is afraid to leave her house She has left her abuser. The abuser still roams the neighborhood, even though she has a no contact order. And she's afraid to even come to see us or to see anybody else. We also have a domestic violence advocate that's stationed at DSHS. And so that's a place where people could walk in and ask to speak to somebody also. And this woman is just terrified to see what else can be done. So we are communicating with her and we will help her. But I think that's just, people are afraid, so it's hard for people to come forward.
And what can the average do? What would you say to the average person that knows something's going on? What should they do?
I think the average person should express their concern for somebody. People, women or men that are being abused, quite often are not going to say that or maybe use those words. But sometimes you see things or people describe situations that happened that clearly something bad is happening. So I think expressing our concern for that person, letting them know that, the YWCA is a safe place that somebody could call, even if they're unsure what's happening, is a real issue. I think learning more yourself about the signs of domestic violence, even in children, kind of keeping an eye out for our children in our community.
Has the problem grown over the years, or do you think that are we more aware of the problem now in 2019 than we were even 10, 20 years ago, do you think?
I think we've always been aware. I think what's different is people are openly talking about it and trying to not let it be in the shadows as much. This state of Washington, and even right here in Yakima, has worked very hard to try to improve police response, prosecutor response, court response, and that's through a joint effort that everybody knows this is something that we have to keep working toward, eliminating violence in our community. One effort also I know in the community that's happening is around gangs, and we hear from a lot of women that are in gangs, and they're afraid to leave because they think something really terrible is going to happen. And so to be curious as the work on the gang task force happens, and if gang violence reduces in our community, will our domestic violence go down? And I will be curious to see what kind of impact that will make, because I do think it'll make a difference.
Very interesting. What are some of the resources? We've talked about some of the things that you do. You've talked about some of the resources. You've got a hotline number. You've got a website.
Yes, so we do have a 24-hour hotline. We're staffed 7 days a week. Somebody can speak to somebody on the phone. If somebody needed to come in for shelter or something else, we can arrange that. We also, people can drop in during the day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and meet with somebody without an appointment. As I mentioned, we have the DV, Domestic Violence Advocate at DSHS. And people can also make an appointment with our legal advocate. And we also work a lot with Aspen Victim Services, which is our sexual assault program. So sometimes people will call them and then they get referred back. But many of the organizations in the community and businesses know that we're here and certainly can also be a conduit to somebody reaching out. We quite frequently hear from medical providers or school counselors or people in other nonprofit agencies or sometimes the churches. So people have done a really good job of understanding we are available to people and don't have to be the expert on what's happening, but certainly being that little warm handoff and a bridge really helps somebody.
Now, what would you tell a woman that may be in this situation, that may be in a domestic violence situation? What would you tell them?
I would tell her that most abuse does not stop. It continues to escalate over time. And there are going to be times where it seems like things are improving, but it always happens kind of along a continuum. I have also noticed that if a person's experiencing verbal abuse or some sort of mental abuse, if that can control them, they may or may not ever be physically assaulted. But it does lead to that, and sometimes it leads to death.
And it can be even worse sometimes. The mental abuse can be just as
yes,
bad.
And it certainly, that takes a very long time to heal. You know, your bruises or cuts or broken bones or whatever can heal up, but what people go through psychologically and emotionally takes a long time to recover from. But I would not want a woman to let that stand in her way of at least trying to find out what would life be like if they weren't being abused. And so coming and talking with a domestic violence advocate can help just kind of shed a light on what would life be like. You know, what are the hurdles I might face? You know, what kind of things to expect? Anything that happens within the YWCA is all confidential. And we also, it doesn't commit somebody to anything. So if somebody's afraid, they can still talk to us and they're not committing themselves to anything, because we are completely about people making their own choices. Because often, if you're in an abusive relationship, your options are limited.
Can it make it worse sometimes if it's, I mean, if they report and then it can make it worse, can it?
It could make it worse, but we would talk with people about a safety plan.
Right, and you want to get them out of the situation.
Yes,
possible.
I mean, ultimately, we want everybody to not be abused.
Right.
And every person has their own path to follow to get to that place. So we want to help people understand what they can expect and what can you do in a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Right.
And help them build that safety plan.
Because every situation is different.
It is different.
Anything else we should talk about? We've covered quite a bit of ground today.
I just think that we have amazing community support.
Yes, we do.
And the women and children and men that are experiencing domestic violence would not be able to find a life that's prosperous and thriving without the whole community.
Right.
So we're just one little part of the beginning of their journey. And the community has done a great job in stepping up in all sorts of ways, whether they're volunteering or supporting us financially or providing Mother's Day. They had a big party and there was lots of gifts, and all of that was from the generosity of the community. So we really appreciate that.
Okay, I think that's all I've got, unless you've got some more.
People should call us at 509-248-7796 is the hotline number.
Okay, and we'll share that also.
And call anytime. We're happy to chat with people.
Okay. Thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you for
me.
having me.
And thank you for joining us on Yakima on Target.
If you or someone you know needs help with the domestic violence situation, call the 24-hour YWCA crisis hotline at 509-248-7796. For general information about the YWCA Yakima, visit www.ywcayakima.org. And be sure to always dial 911 in an emergency.
Stay on target.
Almost there.
Stay on target.
Almost there.
What?